Welcome everybody to our special meeting.
Sorry, Sue. Yes, I'm letting people in. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And welcome to David Barrett, our special guest who's going to speak to us. He's from MySafe LA. So let's start let me just tell you that I am recording this meeting for secretarial purposes, but also so that we can save part of it and put it on our YouTube channel for people that aren't able to be here. So it is being recorded. And I'm calling the meeting to order. And Chris, would you like to read Community Council mission?
Yes, I will. Thanks. All right. So for those who don't know, we read this at every meeting as part of our bylaws and our tradition. So let me find it here. There we go. The purpose of the Pacific Palisades Community Council shall be to, 1, be a forum for the consideration of community issues, 2, be an advocate for Pacific Palisades to government and private agencies upon issues where there is broad community agreement, as reflected by 2/3 of the board members voting on any one of these issues at a PPCC meeting, and 3, assist other organizations in the Palisades which want help in accomplishing their objectives or projects which the PPCC determines to support.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Now I'm going to quickly.
That's it.
Going to quickly take roll so we make sure that we have a quorum, so that we can vote at the end. Quentin Fleming, I see you there. Here. Beth, you're here. I don't think Jenny's here. Jenny's on a nice vacation. Miriam Czar. Chris Spitz, you're here. Joanna Rodriguez.
Cindy's here.
Cindy's here. Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Steve Crone.
I'm here.
Okay. Julia Nielsen.
I'm here.
Okay. Karen Ridgely. Or no, wait, Leanne Sanderson, I think is going to be here.
Hi, I'm here for Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kimberly Bloom.
I'm here.
Okay. Lori Cudzel.
I'm here.
Okay. Either Sharon or Alex. Is Alex Horner here for Sharon?
Sharon told me Alex would be here for her. I don't know if he's here.
Right.
Sorry, I'm here.
Alex is here, I see him.
Hi.
I'm sorry, what?
Couldn't find my mute button. I'm here.
Okay. Okay. Andrew Wolfberg or Jan Shorts. And could everybody just make sure you're on mute? So
I
that we.
saw Jan. I don't know if she's still here, but I did see her.
You did. Okay. Question mark. James Alexakis.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Janet Anderson. Or Rick McGay.
I'm here. Janet's here.
Janet, great, thank you. Richard
Jan
Blumenberg.
is here.
Jan is here. Welcome, Jan. Glad to have you.
I got to turn off my mute. Okay.
Is Richard here?
Yeah, he's here. I see
Okay.
him.
Eric Dugdale?
Did you say Eric Dugdale?
I did.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Eric. John Evans? Or Kay Stensiper?
Kay told me she'd be here, but I don't know if she's here yet.
Okay. Jessica Rogers?
I think Jessica was going to be here too, but
He was going to be here. John Patton?
I'm here.
Thank you, John. Hagop Shakarian?
Here.
Hi. Oh yeah, you're with the jokes. I remember. Dave Card?
I'm here.
Okay. So let me count. 1, 2, 3. I believe we have quorum. Is that correct, Chris?
yes.
Okay, we're good. Before we get started, I just want to say briefly how sorry I am that we're all grieving together this wonderful, wonderful teenage boy from the Palisades, Braun Levy. I know we're all thinking about his his parents, his sister, all of his family, his Loyola family, his Palisades family. It was a terrible tragedy that he passed away. And I just wanted to make sure we all keep good thoughts and prayers for his family. So that being said, I'm
Sue, do you mind? I'm sorry, after
No.
that
yeah,
very somber announcement, I do want to say Kay Steinsipper just joined.
okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
Sorry, I had trouble logging on.
Oh,
But
that's
I'm
okay.
here.
No worries, Kay, no worries.
Thank you.
So I'm going to introduce David Barrett from My Safe LA. You know, as you all know, we've been having a lot of discussions, emails back and forth about what's going on at the state level and at our local level, and about, especially about this zone 0. And I think David's going to help explain to us. He goes back and forth to Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and he's here most of the time. And he's our expert. So I'm going to ask David to explain to us what's going on, and then we can take questions and comments from all of you. So, David, you're up.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I really appreciate everyone coming together like this. It is because of your ability to act as a community that helps each other that can really help facilitate change in any number of ways. And I empathize with everyone for the last 4 months plus. I know that I used to live in a home on Bienvenida that was destroyed. So I have some connection. And if you don't know about our organization, you should go take a look at mysafela.org. We are state mandated as the LA County and Riverside County wildfire coordinators, which kind of ties first responders and communities together. We've been working with Sue since the fall of last year to help create a fire safe council, and it's something that we're still eager to see happen in the Palisades because it will open the door to grants, perhaps significant grants, and there are more and more of them evolving and appearing. As it relates to this evening, there's really one key issue for us to talk about, and that's the confusion and some of the challenges related to the proposed Zone 0 modifications. And I can also, if you have questions about Senator Schiff's new tax credit bill called Firewall, I can answer some of those. We've been working with the Senator legislative team pretty closely and with a number of other fire departments to get everyone engaged as it relates to Firewall, which could provide up to $25,000 in tax credit for people that are defending their home. So let me tell you that from the highest possible level, this is a 50-50 kind of exchange. I want to be able to hear from everyone that has questions, and I want to try and help clear some things up that might be confusing. But the most important thing to say is that the specification for Zone 0 is not determined. And a lot of things that we've been hearing and that you've been hearing are concerning. And I've seen the draft of the letter that Sue shared with me, and I would say right up front, you should absolutely send a letter. You should absolutely communicate what you believe is important to your community. The only comment that I would make about that is that your letter should, to the extent possible, talk about what should happen as opposed to simply complaining about what you're afraid will happen. And it's extremely important to the state fire marshal, Daniel Berlant, and to Cal OES's wildfire project chief, Jay Lopez, a former LA County assistant chief, that the community shares good information about what they believe is necessary. And I'll share my opinion about something moving forward, but for me, and I've been involved with this for many years, and for the last 4 years in depth as the county coordinators for wildfire and pretty familiar with what's going on in the April 7th meeting and looking forward to the May 12th public input meeting. I would note right now that every month on the third Thursday, we have a virtual town hall, very much like what we're doing right now. And this month on May the 15th, our virtual town hall will be all about Zone Zero solutions and interests. And our special guest will be Travis Longcore from UCLA, who some of you may know. Travis and I talk to each other and collaborate on things. And I think you've probably seen what he wrote up with some of his colleagues about the science of things. And I think that's a very worthwhile thing. The number one concern for me, as I see all of you, and I'm attending a meeting almost every night from concerned homeowners, is that nobody should feel like they're being punished for living where they live. And I think one of the big concerns about what you're hearing about Zone Zero is that it is, it's almost like punishment. It's like, how dare you live where you live, and now you're going to do what we tell you to do. And we all deal way too much with being told what we need to do. So the Zone Zero policy that updates the law that was established in 2020 is not finalized, and that's why they're having another session. And you know, you may get a mailing from the Los Angeles City Fire Department that tells you what Zone Zero is. If you do, it's premature, but it is relevant related to brush clearance. So if we could start there, every year the City of Los Angeles has a unique to the city brush clearance rule that you probably all know too well, but all the same, we'll just mention it quickly. It's 200 feet from a structure's wall out to the edge of their property. You basically have until the end of May to complete that, and you can be fined if you don't complete it, and your neighbors can be fined if they don't complete it. But the objective is to reduce brush. But we all know that as it relates to ignition, brush is only one component. And this year, as I see in the chat, I haven't actually opened it up, but I see in the chat there's a stipulation about removing all kinds of trees and other kinds of issues. And if you are concerned about that, I would encourage you to send a letter to the Los Angeles City Fire Marshal, David Perez. He's a deputy chief responsible for all brush clearance and for fire prevention. And there's no reason why you shouldn't write to him either. David Perez is the fire marshal for the city of Los Angeles, and he's responsible for the mailings and for everything that you hear. We want to come up with solutions that are worthwhile. And Zone Zero, when it was originally conceived, really had in mind rural type structures that had lots of setback between them and other properties that were in an area that there was a lot of land around them. Zone Zero is not intended for the ABC streets. It's not intended for, when it was created, it's not intended for the Hollywood Hills. It's not intended for Benedict Canyon. Why? Because it's impossible. It's, as you guys know, I mean, if you're in the ABC streets, you've got setbacks of 6 feet in many cases. So it's very difficult to create any kind of appropriate activity. One of the things that's very important is that the Zone Zero law is 5 feet. I've heard a lot of people confused about that recently, talking about a transition zone and is it going to be 10 feet? It's designed to be 5 feet, but they're discussing the possibility of preventing anyone from planting trees within 10 feet. It's not a 10-foot zone. It's a 10-foot no tree zone. And as we all know, you've all seen what happened all around you, and for many of you that lost your homes, there's a lot of trees still standing. And there are people who've lost their homes, but their yard, there are plants and shrubbery, vegetation within that 5-foot zone that burned during the Palisades fire that were ignited by the structure, not the other way around. So these are things that everyone kind of needs to think about, but it doesn't mean that we need to absolutely go after the state saying, no way, no how, we're not going to do it, we're angry. It's okay to be angry and it's okay to be concerned, but I think it'd be great if we could all come up with some solutions that would help direct them forward. So we're contemplating, and we're still studying this, but I want to share it with you, and then I want to just start taking questions. I like the idea of the law evolving into a three-part law. And by the way, I have no authority to determine this, so I'm not sharing with you how it should be. I'm just giving you an opinion about experienced wildland fire suppression folks like ourselves. If your home was built before 2007, there should be suggestions on what you do with that existing property, because there's so much that can be done in zone 0 that has nothing to do with removing trees, removing well-planted and hydrated vegetation. But there should be some guidance about that. People that have lived in a home, aged in place in that home, again, shouldn't feel like they're being punished. So part 1 would be, how do we deal with homes built before 2007, right? So we all know about the fire code and 7A and some of the other aspects of how this works. I can tell you that after the airport fire that went mainly into Riverside County, which we also have jurisdiction over, we found a number of homes that were well defended and hardened, and they did not burn at all when homes all around them were destroyed. So in that setting where you've got a setback of, 300, 400 feet, defending that space and defending that home is extremely important. I also feel, by the way, I should take a step back and say, our opinion is that this idea of home hardening and defensible space in an urban setting is confusing, right? I think there's really only one thing we should be concerned about. It's home defense, right? We want to defend our homes. You want to defend your homes. So anything that's related to defending your home, that could include property. But if we're splitting it up into these different things where we could be negotiating back and forth, and what does it mean for my property? Because I would bet that every single person here, their home is different. No two homes are directly alike unless you live in a condo. So keep in mind that our focus is on home defense. So if part 1 is homes built before 2007, and part 2 is homes built between 2008 and 2023 or 4, wherever it might be, and how you then stipulate that. If you look at the homes that did not burn, many of them were built in the last 5 years. So construction materials, roofing, things like that, the type of windows used, they all contribute to the potential for a home to survive. The number one thing that burns homes down is heat or flame or embers getting inside the house. Outside the house, there's all kinds of things that are going on separate. So we want to make sure that we can seal up our homes as best we possibly can. And then the third part of this would be new construction. And I see no reason why everyone couldn't come up with a mandate for how new homes are constructed. They haven't been built yet, so you can stipulate about how you should or shouldn't manage the exterior sheeting, what type of vegetation goes within a 5-foot zone around the home, and so on. But to simply tell you that because your home was built in 1965 and you've enjoyed it for many years, and let's assume it's still standing, that you now have to tear everything out in a 5-foot zone and that's going to solve the problem. That's, I think, very challenging. And if we look at enforcement, the law that will be modified and go into effect on January the 1st, 2026, contemplates 3 years to come into compliance as it currently stands. And the question then is, well, who's going to enforce it? And what will the enforcement be as you move forward? And it seems to me that the most likely form of enforcement will be insurance companies. Because if you look at many other state laws, for example, it is a state law that you have a CO detector on every floor of your home. Who's enforcing that? It's really not being enforced. And one of the other issues is that related to all these laws is that we have state leaders, we have some federal folks who are interested in what's going on. We have a lot of local folks, both at the supervisor level and at the city council level. And then we have advocates, right? People who are very engaged in their communities and are connecting themselves to elected officials and so on and so forth. Keep in mind that the people who are making these laws are not elected into their positions, right? They are hired into their positions or assigned into their positions. But the people who are your representatives, they are elected. And so it's very important that the appropriate communication be shared with them so that they can make good decisions representing you and representing the community overall. So having said that, I'd like to take a couple of questions so that we can kind of make sure that this is interactive and it's not just a one-way communication from me. So seeing hands up, if you're okay, Sue, I'll just call on people and they can speak. Is that all right with you?
That would be great. Thank you.
So I'm going to start at the top of my screen to the left. Let's start with Carl Mellinger.
Hi,
Can you-
good afternoon, David. Just a little background. I'm an arborist, been in the tree care business for over 40 years, and I've worked around many, many fires, and then it really got crazy from 2017 on. So to concur, I'm an expert witness with dealing with fires, and to concur with you said, the houses burn first, generally on a lot of the fires that I've been involved with. So I think that's pretty common ground on what people know. I noticed that the language on this document leaves out the potential for other trees that are not native that are fire resistant. And I think people need to understand that it's not only native trees that are fire resistant, the native plants burn as well. But is this document the final say?
No.
Okay, and are you saying that it has till January 1st, 26 to become final?
So it will probably become final before then, Carl, but I would suspect in the October, November timeframe. And, you know, the final decision will likely be made by Daniel Berlant, who is the state fire marshal, and his team. And it certainly will have to go by the governor, and it will certainly have to be introduced to the legislator.
So,
And
so
if the
tech-
state, hang on just one sec. If
Yeah,
the
I'm
state
sorry.
legislature is involved, then we're going to have to see something happen before September the 21st when they go into recess.
Okay, because I know Longcore's letter is very descriptive. I don't want to be redundant and get into that. I actually know an arborist that signed off on that, Jan Scow. So this has been out in the community already for many years because of the insurance companies.
Yep.
Having them be the final decider is going to be very problematic. I'm very versed on the struggle it is for my clients to maintain their trees based on non-scientific conversations that the insurance companies operate on, and it's been an incredibly tough struggle. And if they become the enforcers, it's going to be very hard on homeowners. So I also noticed that the document is heavy on palms. Palms that are maintained are not fire bombs, and a lot of palms are not flammable at all. So the document to me is really hard on insisting that you do a couple points, but one refreshing part is the word should is used throughout the document, which is distinct from shall legally. Now I'm hoping that if this doesn't get adjusted, those words are going to be pretty powerful in Zone B definition. My biggest concern is Zone B, where they're talking about focusing on only using these kind of plants and other than that. So basically, those are my points. And you know, if it is still in draft mode, I think the voice is going to be really important from the community council and from other organizations. But you know, it's just really hard reading this kind of document. Already people are thinking that it is law, and they're going out and they're cutting these plant material down. We had a homeowners association meeting yesterday, and the people were under the, you know, presence that this was now going to be a governing document. So I think that's enough for me. I don't want, you know, talk too much, but
So let me react to a little about what you shared, and you can put your hand down now, your digital hand. So it is not finalized. That's why we're having these public sessions. That's why there's the opportunity to send letters and to communicate. And you're absolutely right when you talk about science. It's a terrific opportunity here is to bring science up and for us to be able to share scientific studies which can help them make decisions. Without pointing the finger at any individual, some of what I read in this document and in this law strikes me as being lazy. It's kind of like, you know, how do we find the silver bullet that solves everything for everybody? And one of the issues that everyone should be aware of are the visuals that exist relative to ignition and flammability. So Carl brought up the issue of palm trees. If you talk to a firefighter, most experience and the experience that I have over the last 25 years, if I see a fire around palm trees, there's two things about them that are important. One, they typically are burning. And secondly, if they are burning, then they're shedding a tremendous amount of material, and those embers are what will ignite homes. And so fire departments tend to look at what they see visually and what their experience is, and they pass that along. So if there are palm trees that are not flammable, or that if they're properly maintained, their flammability is reduced, that's great, but it needs to be put into a context that will help decision makers understand the difference between those two things. I'll give you one more example, and then we'll move on to the next question. Everyone's probably familiar with the IDHS and the ember cast test that they've done, where they have a facade of two homes. One is not defended and one is defended, and they blow embers at it through giant fans. That's a really good example about how embers can ignite a structure. But one of the factors that's not taken into account when those tests are conducted is something that you all experience, and that's terrain. So when wind blows over terrain, how it affects the flow of air and of embers and of fire changes. And so embers may fly over a home if it's on a certain level of terrain. And so we need to think about terrain as part of the science, part of the equation of what's going on. But overall, the opportunity here is to share as much as we can about the many studies that exist that talk about the science of ignition, structure versus other kinds of vegetation, including brush, right? So brush is this big deal about we have to clear all of our brush. Well, it's important to clear your brush because it lowers the risk of ignition, right? The state maps that you've probably all seen in the last couple of weeks that were introduced on March the 24th, the very high fire severity zone maps, those are not risk maps. And I think it's very important that people remember that. Those are hazard maps. So those are related to areas where the potential for an ignition exists. And what is not included in those very high fire severity zone maps at all is the implication of structures. This is strictly about vegetation and the hazards that vegetation may present. Chris Spitz.
Hi there. Thank you so much, David. I'm just so you know, I'm an at-large representative for the on the Pacific Palisades Community Council. I've been a board member for years, so I was the drafter of that letter that you've seen on our agenda. And by the way, several people, or at least one, maybe two, on the chat are asking where can they send letters. So the PPCC letter, as well as the letter from PFC and Dr. Longcore and his group, all indicate the email address where this should be. You can go to where your letters should be sent. So you can go to our website, pacpalicc.org, and you can see a link to the agenda and you'll see those letters. So getting back to the letter, this may be more of a discussion for the next item, which actually has to do with the letter, but I appreciated everything you said. The information was very important. So our letter was written only, within a few days of learning about all of this and reading Dr. Longcore's letter and reading the PSC letter. The letter basically supports the conclusions and comments in those letters, but it does ask for two things. Maybe not as specific if we had more time and expertise and bandwidth, but it asks for the committee to reconsider its recommendations for Zone 0 based on the science with regard to the well-hydrated plants. And secondly, we ask for the committee to take into account not a one-size-fits-all approach for the state, but the differences between urban and wildlands areas with tract homes that are close to one another versus,
Absolutely.
what do we want to say? Large lots in the foothills of the Sierras.
Rural versus
So-
urban. Make it
Right,
simple.
so
Rural
those are the
versus
two
urban.
things we pretty much emphasize. We didn't have the bandwidth to go into more detail. Perhaps Dave could enlighten us if he has more. Personally, I think the letter is sufficient for now. We may want to come up with something to give to the advisory committee as the process moves on. But right now, we have a deadline of 2.5 days to get in that letter. So we'll see what the board thinks when we get to that point. Thank you so much. Oh, also, there's a couple of people on this call from Brentwood whom we also work with a lot, who also have serious concerns and have been following this more than I have. So hopefully we'll get to them. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Chris. David Card.
Hi, I'm David Card. I'm head of the Palisades Forestry Committee, and our mission is to save the trees we have and plant more. So
Good.
these guidelines and proposed regulations may inhibit that. At least that's the opinion that we wrote in our letter that is linked on the agenda for this meeting. And we relied heavily on the science provided by Dr. Longcore. And I urge everyone to take a look at his letter as well that's linked on the agenda. He offers solutions. So in order to be brief, in the forestry letter that we wrote, we just recommended that the Board of Forestry at the state level follow some of his suggestions and his recommendations. And we also just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that a statewide implementation of guidelines does not help us at all in terms of making it applicable to an urban setting where houses are so close together, and we're not a rural forest. We're in a tract of homes in a dense city. The Palisades is not as dense in some places as others, but we should be preserving the trees that we can see with our own eyeballs that the trees fared far better than the homes in this wind-driven fire. I don't know that anything could have stopped it other than more firefighters and an abundance of water and more air power to strike it down sooner. But these were circumstances that were unique. Hopefully, will not be replicated in the near future, but certainly will be a threat on an ongoing basis. And I'd like to see that some balance and some flexibility be built into this for urban settings and suburban settings like ours, rather than a one-size-fits-all. And those are my comments. Thank you.
David, those are all very relevant and important things, and you should pursue what you're doing. I'm going to talk in a few minutes. Let's take some more questions, more about the collaboration opportunity that exists. But one of the key issues is, the difference between a wildfire and something else, right? So in the Palisades, in the Highlands, the initial homes that were burned were destroyed as a result of a wildfire. But the majority of the Palisades were not burned because of a wildfire. They were burned because of an urban conflagration. And once you tip over from wildfire to urban fire, it's a completely different set of circumstances, particularly when you have very high-speed winds. And fire experts will tell you that once that happens, you could have 2,000 or 3,000 firefighters, and it's going to be very difficult for them to do anything. No city's water system is designed for that much water to be utilized all at once for a long period of time. And if it's night and the wind is howling and there's a lot of smoke, air assets are not going to be able to fly either. So there's all kinds of issues, as David just said, which create that unique kind of perfect storm of issues.
Let me just add one quick thing, and that is that when you talk about home hardening, to me, that means things like what we did with our house, which is cover the whole house in concrete siding. And I think that might have helped save our house. It certainly probably isn't determinative, but it certainly helped. There are other ways to harden your home. And I think hardening the home should be the focus rather than cutting down trees. That's just my general opinion. Thank you.
I echo your sentiment. As I said earlier, this is about home defense, right? We're defending our homes, and there's many ways to do it. I don't think you have to use concrete all the time, but there are many ways that we can do that. Emily, hi. You're still muted, Emily. There
Okay,
you
there we go. Thank you. So first of all, David, I appreciate everything you're saying. And I have to say, I feel like I'm suddenly hearing the voice of reason. Whereas I spent the entire day, April 7th, with the group that is, really going to be implementing these zone rules. And I spent the entire day and heard nothing that was reasonable. Mercury Insurance was front and center. They were very vocal, and at every suggestion that there might be some nuance, or there might be some, adaptation to local conditions, the response was, no, that's too much work. The fire guys don't know the difference between an oak tree and a, fill in the blank. There was the suggestion actually from Travis Longcore that, well, for our wooden fences, there are very good wood coat, fire resistant coatings that can be put on the wood so that we don't have to rip out our wooden gates that are attached to our homes or our fences. And they said, well, yes, those coatings work, but they have to be put on once a year. Therefore, that's no good. You've got to get rid of anything wood that's touching your home. So every suggestion that was any sort of middle ground was absolutely shot down. And at one point I asked about this transition zone that I find extremely troubling, and was told, well, just wait and see. Once these rules are in place, somebody will come out and tell you. And every single, so I took a walk around my neighborhood after spending the day and I took pictures of homes all around. And I have to tell you, if what they were envisioning in that meeting got implemented, every single privacy hedge, for example, on Homewood in Brentwood, would have to come down. And there was, constant reference to your barn and your outbuildings and blah, blah, blah. So everything was geared towards the rural setting. And when I asked, well, can we have some modification to all of this? I was told, well, locally, your city can make it more stringent, but they may not make it more lenient. And there was a big push from what was originally envisioned as an ember resistant zone to a non-combustible zone.
That's
and
right.
that ship has sailed. And that was very clear that these people were so entrenched with the idea that everything had to be hardscape, 5 feet around your house, and that there was no middle ground, no well-hydrated plants, nothing. And I have to say it was very very disturbing. And again, you sound like a very reasonable person, and everything I've heard makes me feel better about this than I have in weeks. But I have to say the May 12th meeting that I plan to attend, that's not a Zoom, it's not a Microsoft meeting, it's a dial-in phone call. So, you know, I had a hard enough time. I had my hand up most of the day on April 7th, and I had a really tough time getting called on it. At one point, they got really angry with me and said, "Will you stop asking us questions?" or something to that effect. Then when I started pushing on zone 1, I heard one guy whisper to the other, "Oh, let's not talk about that because we're not changing that." I mean, it was just, I mean, talk about top down draconian. This is not good.
So Emily, if you don't mind, I've heard everything that you've said and I have some things to say about it, but let's get a couple of questions because I think what you're talking about is kind of the elephant in the room in many cases. So,
Well, no, it's very specific to zone 0. It's how is zone 0 going to be implemented? That's what's important.
Okay, but
Zone
we
zero
need
is-
to move on to a couple other.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Okay.
Zone 0 is the elephant.
Thanks.
Richard?
Draconian response to a fire that nothing would have survived. My office building burned down. It was surrounded by Sunset, La Cruz, and a parking lot. So there's nothing burning within, 100 feet of the building. I did houses that had stone veneer, met all the fire codes, and they burned down. So I think, you're just overreacting. I think that it makes sense maybe to have a 3-foot zone away from the house without plants. So nothing will burn right next to the house. But to say 5 feet, all you get is some pots, doesn't make sense to me.
So that's a very good question. And I want to address it right now. The testing that the IBHS and CAL FIRE have done, where they blow embers of different sizes, but only organically sourced embers, right? So there's no embers from a burning structure that are blowing. They're all from trees or leaves or other organic materials. The distance at which they bounce off a home and die is 5 feet. If they land 3 feet, they tend to live. So 5 feet is why they've kind of said if it bounces away or it lands 5 feet away, the ember will not sustain its own ability to burn. And that's why they've picked the 5-foot zone. However, everything that everyone is talking about, that I'm talking about, has the same level of validity that one size does not fit all. So I'm going to come back and talk to you all about some of these other aspects, but let's take 2 more questions before I do. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, thank you. First, I want to echo what David Card said. I have a standing house where the trees burned, but because of stucco and double pane windows and external sprinklers, it's around. Just quick question. As I look at complying with what seems like is going to happen, I'm sort of interested in these artificial box hedges that you see at events. And they say that they're fire resistant. Have you looked at anything like that? Would that be permissible? Thank you.
Well, certainly it's a good question. And certainly the idea of, here's the big question that kind of relates to what you're asking, Lynn, which is, gee, what could I put there that would be okay, right? What can I put in that zone 0 thing that would be okay? And just by a show of hands, how many people feel that at some point in time, they've done what they're supposed to do, but some neighbor of theirs has not? Anybody? Right? So look at all these hands going up. So this is, I think, the challenge for leadership as it relates to the state and laws, which is many people will tell us that they're going to do the right thing, but then they don't. And one of the big challenges, particularly in an urban environment, is that if your neighbor's house ignites and burns, your house is so close that just the heat from that house may ignite your house. So, and if that happens, zone 0 is it's a non-factor, right? It's not related to it. So it's a complicated issue and we have to find ways that we can make it more palatable for everyone. I think there's an opportunity. I'm going to talk about it more in a few minutes. Hi, Beth.
Hey, thanks for coming tonight. It's really interesting, and it's also interesting hearing that you also experienced this yourself. I got to say, I went to my house yesterday for the first time physically on the property. I've driven by it. It was too hard to get into before. But I physically went, it's up a hill. I went up a hill. I was trying to see if there's anything else to save in the house. The house, it was built in 2008. It's Spanish tile, all tile roof, stucco walls. Everything in the house was demolished except for chimneys. So all gone. But my backyard, perfectly green. Trees in bloom, fruit in bloom, hydrangeas coming, roses thriving, green grass, all green. So what was interesting, my son keeps saying houses are made out of sticks, and plants, if they're well planted and well watered, they survive. So I just feel like some of the other comments, this draconian one size fits all, isn't really correct. And you know, we all work hard, we all pay taxes, and we all want to enjoy life. And part of that is having, you know, a beautiful atmosphere around us and not looking at your neighbor through the window. We just have to work together, and just feel like it's going to be a layer of bureaucracy that's going to be really frustrating for our community. So I want to articulate those thoughts. Thank you.
And thank you very much. And let me respond with a couple things. First of all, when this is all done, when whatever the law is that is implemented in January of 2026, not everyone's going to be happy. I mean, that's just kind of how it's going to end up being. But I also want to stress that when we educate people about why they should be a fire safe council or why they should be an NFPA Firewise site, we talk about two very critical things. And one is the most flammable item, the most flammable material related to wildfires. And the answer is grass. Grass is the most flammable item. And then we talk about the second most flammable item. And the most second flammable item is buildings, right? It's structures. It isn't trees. It isn't other kinds of things. Your grass is probably watered, and so it's full of moisture. There's also, so if embers land in your lawn, they will probably die because of the moisture that's involved there. But we have this issue, which is that we have an urban environment, right? Your homes, for the most part, were not destroyed by a wildfire. They were destroyed by an urban conflagration, and you can look that up, ChatGPT it, study it. It's not the same thing as a wildfire. And zone 0, zone 1, and zone 2 are all oriented around wildfire. And the new state maps, they add 113,000 acres. It's much broader in terms of its scope, but it's about hazard risk related to ignition. So the complexity of all of this is so that people are frustrated at all levels. Our elected officials are frustrated. I certainly know that Lindsay Horvath is working, her office is working very hard to come up with solutions. I know that CD11 and CD7 in the city, I think Tracy Park has made this her personal mission to do everything she can to try and make things better. But the challenges are widespread, and there isn't a single answer. So one of the things that we're going to be focusing on during the coming several weeks is, first of all, I don't have a lot of optimism about the May 12th meeting simply because it's a call-in, but I also don't have a lot of optimism about letters or complaints that, or committees that are formed that are about stopping this. I think it's very, very important that strength being demonstrated in numbers by people who are very well engaged with their neighbors and their communities to speak loudly. I can tell you in my personal conversations at both the state and federal level that the number one thing I hear is these are just stressed, unhappy people. So they're essentially discarding what a lot of the complaints are about. And that's not good. I think it's really important that we find ways to break through and get out of the noise and make sure that what we're sharing is important. So that's why in our next town hall meeting, having Travis Longcord there to talk about science is hugely important. And we will also talk about the results of our Zone 0 survey, which has lots of good information in it, which has been shared with the fire marshal, with the LAFD, with the LA County Fire Department, with other fire departments, with Cal OES, with Senator Schiff, Senator Padilla, with the legislature. I mean, we've spread this around in a lot of places, and a lot of the reaction that we had is, wow, this is really interesting. And one of the reasons we're getting that reaction is because there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, almost 600 people that participated in it. So my hope is that we can come up with a strategy by pulling some of your leaders together, and like Sue Cole, like Thelma Waxman in Brentwood, like some of the folks in the Hollywood Hills, and we can create a document that is a solutions document and that is signed off by the leadership of our fire safe councils, our Firewise sites, and our dense urban neighborhoods, and that we could then present that. I will take it personally to Sacramento and hand deliver it to CAL FIRE and hand deliver it to Cal OES and hand deliver it if necessary to Senator Schiff and Senator Padilla, because I interact with all of them, and say, look, here is where we need to be looking and going. And if it has the underwriting of thousands of homeowners, I think that will speak volumes as opposed to letters from here and there that are just mad and angry. The other aspect that we haven't talked about a lot tonight, and I don't know how much time we want to spend on this, because I would encourage you to move on with voting about the letter you want to send, and I would encourage you to send it. You may want to edit it or make some changes, but I think overall it's very important that you send it. Gesundheit, Beth. And I think it's really, really important that as we look at things, we also think about the insurance factor. And we're going to be engaging much more closely with the State Department of Insurance. I know that Commissioner Lara thought that he had a good solution in plan, and then the Palisades and Eaton fires occurred, and that kind of threw everything out the window again. But it's hugely important that we not allow insurance companies to dictate how we manage our home properties and punish us for enjoying our living environment. And the only way to do that is to give them good scientific evidence that the steps being taken aren't going to result in no fire. One of the things that Commissioner Lara came up with, which I think is extremely valuable, is to change the insurance model from looking back to looking forward. So what does that mean, real briefly? Traditionally, we've looked at the history of fire. So let's use the Palisades as an example. In the old model, the model pre-2024, no one in the Palisades would be insurable because of the recent wildfires, not just the January 7th fire, but the January 1st fire, the 1993 fire, all the different things that have happened in the past would add up to an insurance company saying, you know what, there's just too much risk. Now, with this forward-looking projection item, we can use technology, AI, machine learning, other kinds of things to determine we've had a fire. So what's the likelihood of it occurring again? And it's going to be much lower as you look forward, which means that the risk is lower. And if the risk is lower, the ability to insure folks to make reasonably priced policies available should be realistic. No one should have to depend on, the FAIR plan as their only hope for insurance. Currently the FAIR plan has paid out about $1.5 billion in claims, and yet there's almost $6 billion in claims to satisfy. So there's a huge issue just with that one provider. And then we have the non-admitted insurance companies. So in our May meeting, we're going to be talking about Zone 0. In our June meeting, we're going to be talking about two very important things: changing the process for home insurance related to wildfire, and some new applications of retardant that can be applied to a home that don't need to be wet to be active, that will actively mitigate fire risk. One of the things that I've heard from a couple of different people is about their homes not burning or getting close to not burning. And one of the issues about, for example, artificial fire-resistant planters that could be installed is everything burns when it gets hot enough. And so in a wildfire, you're often looking at temperatures that are in the 700, 800 degree range. When you're looking at the fire in the Palisades, we're looking at 2000 degrees. Everything burns. absolutely everything will burn if given the opportunity to. Now, that means it needs to take hold. So the leaves and branches from trees are gone, but the trees aren't gone because they're sturdy and strong. Our lawns are wet, right? We water our lawns for the most part, particularly in more affluent neighborhoods. There are very few surviving lawns in Altadena, but there are plenty of surviving trees and vegetation. And the setbacks between homes in Altadena are wider. So it just goes to show that an urban fire can spread from building to building to building very easily. So what we need to work on together are solutions to make it happen. And we're going to bring not only Travis, but other scientists together. And we're going to talk to the IBHS. I'm meeting in June with the entire NFPA wildfire team. And we're going to spend an afternoon strategizing about education, not just for the public, but for the state and for insurance companies to help them understand more about what's going on. If insurance companies had to pass an exam about understanding wildfire risk, I think that would be pretty interesting. I don't necessarily have the power to implement it on my own, but if we all get together, maybe we'll be able to make some changes.
David?
Yeah.
In the interest of not going too awfully long, I have I see 4 other hands up.
Yeah, let's do it real quick.
If we could start with Reza and then go as quickly as possible, then we have to move on
Yep.
to actually voting.
Sounds good.
This isn't a regular 2-hour meeting,
We
so,
know.
okay, thanks.
Tessa, good evening.
Hi, David. You know, a lot of things you're saying are interesting. And one of my biggest comments, I'm a builder. I grew up in the Palisades, graduated Pali High, and been blessed to be able to work in the Palisades and build homes in the Palisades.
Good for you.
I like your distinction between wildfire and urban fire. It actually clicks for me, and I appreciate that. But one of my biggest frustrations in the last 100 days since these fires, or more now, is that you know who's missing from your conversations? People like me. You're not asking, what is it going to cost to make these changes? You're not asking, what is the effect? Everyone wants affordability. Everyone wants to be able to build. Everyone wants us to find ways to make it work with their insurance schemes and what they're being paid to rebuild. I had homes that were Firewise, that followed the Firewise, not knowing what Firewise was. We just wanted to build good homes, and some survived and some didn't. That's just the nature of it. We haven't used wood fencing for 10 years. All that composite fencing completely melted. It's disappeared.
Sure.
It's not there. So ULA wrote a report. If you look at the board of the ULA, not one construction expert, not one builder, not one general contractor. You look at the Blue Ribbon Committee that met today in Santa Monica for Lindsay Horvath's office, all a bunch of professors and think tanks. Not one builder, not one architect, not one construction expert, nothing like that part of the conversation. I can only urge you organizations to bring more people like us into the conversation, because we're the boots on the ground. We're in the Palisades every day trying to figure out how to build. And it just astonishes me. I mean, Tracy Park has opened the door to listening to us, but the county supervisor, no, not the case. And I've only can urge her field deputies to add builders to these committees, and they haven't. So you're here, you're in person. I appreciate all the hard work you're doing. And I can only urge you to please bring people like me into the conversation of what you're trying to do.
We have a number of builders that we're talking to. I would love to add you to the list since you're so locally oriented, but we need to make sure, just as with everything else, that we deal with builders at different levels: independent home builders, custom home builders, and tract home builders. I think we need to get the input from the different perspectives so that we can be better educated about the
But
fact.
you don't have tract homes in the Palisades.
This
All
issue,
of them.
Reza, this issue has to go way beyond the
Yeah,
Palisades.
statewide, Reza.
It has
I
to go
understand.
statewide.
I understand, but
And so,
it's still Palisades, not one size fits all. I mean,
agreed,
yeah.
No, absolutely agreed, and your comments are well received. Thank you very much. Donna?
Valeria is next, I think.
Oh, okay. I don't see that.
You don't see
On
Valeria?
mute. Sorry,
Uh-huh.
I was on mute. Hi. So I am part of Resilient Palisades. We'll be writing a letter ourselves and we're gonna comment. Yes, absolutely. We should focus on home hardening. We should focus on, defendable space. What does that entail? You keep on talking about well hydrated, well maintained. When we are in a climate stricken drought state. So what does that mean when 70% of our irrigation goes to landscape and we're constantly told we have to monitor? I think that's something that also needs to be addressed because how do we have well-maintained, well-hydrated vegetation when we have numerous days when we're cut off from water? Is that something that you're being cut?
Well, the quick response to that is that history, even the last 6 months, will tell us about how we can go from well-hydrated to drought very quickly, how well-hydrated plants can dry out very quickly based on low humidity and temperature and wind and so on. There's something called the burn index, which will establish how quickly things can ignite. And as I said, this is a complicated issue, and we want to try and avoid the situation that we see in an elementary school where someone comes up with something very, very obtuse that could possibly happen, because what happens when that occurs is that the people who are in charge of things discount things. We need to get their attention and we need to start someplace. And I think just like a community wildfire protection plan, and we're actually building the one for the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah, you spoke of, so we were talking about climate modeling also, because as
Yes,
you
and
mentioned,
climate,
looking back, but we
it's a
need to look forward.
it's a big part of the plan, and it's a big part of looking forward. These documents, and I think the law, they need to be living documents. They need to be things that we can revisit and evolve over time. Donna?
Thank you, David. I appreciate your broad scope of looking at of this very complex issue. I'm an architect, and I'm also now, as of today, the newly elected president of the Pacific Palisades Historical Society.
Good for you. Congratulations.
So thank you. So we had an interesting discussion about this today, and I think the number one thing that comes up is we really need more education for everybody on understanding really where we live. We are in a chaparral area, and the first thing I did was actually go and join the California Chaparral Institute to find out much more information about this environment that we live in and how we need to approach it. So the education factor here, I think, is primary for all of us to understand how our landscaping needs to fit in to this environment. Unfortunately, much of the landscaping in Pacific Palisades kind of replicates a tropical environment that is not really sustainable. So if we want to have this fire-safe community, we have to begin with a fire-safe home. And we need the totality of understanding, not only the landscape of how an appropriate landscape can address where we live, but the houses we build have to be smarter and hardening to be able to survive in what's going to be a continuing era of drought and extreme weather. We will be revisited by this. Fires in our area happen every 100 or so years, catastrophic fires. So we need to be prepared for this in the future. So how can we help you to create more educational opportunity so the recommendations that come from the community council can be more open and appropriate to how we need to respond?
Step one is a meeting like this. Step two, I will have a conversation with Sue, and she may bring 2 or 3 other folks into it. We want to start with a kind of narrow focus to see what we can do. But education is at the top of the list for us as well. And we want to make sure that we make every possible avenue open to people so that you can make informed decisions. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to turn this over to you guys. Daphne? You're muted, Daphne.
I won't repeat anything that other people have said. I have one question or one comment that goes to this is whatever it is that the homeowners do and the builders do and all of that, the one thing that doesn't seem to happen as often as it should is the county and state lands don't seem to be tended to the way they should. And when the fires start in those lands, they spread to our urban areas. And so nobody's really talked about that, but that is something that the state needs to step up and handle, because it can't just be put on the homeowners and the builders to avoid fires if some of them are starting in like the Highlands and then spread to the homes. So
Our CWPP puts accountability on state and federal land and talks about the need for there to be proper designation of the boundaries between local responsibility, state responsibility, and federal responsibility, and that there be some method of managing accountability, that if you don't have accountability, why have a law? It doesn't make any sense.
well, that's kind of the point, because they may be accountable and they're supposed to do things, but unless this community starts yelling and jumping up and down that they haven't trimmed and they haven't cut back and they haven't done things, it doesn't seem to happen. So
And of course, the magic answer to all of this is money, and we don't want to get caught up in that. Sue, thank you very much for the opportunity. As you know, we're here to help you in any way we can. I would encourage everyone to join us on May the 15th, and we'll share the agenda and the Zoom link with Sue, and she can distribute it.
Oh, good. I was going to ask you about that.
And
Good.
whatever we can do to be supportive to Pacific Palisades, we want to be there 110%.
Thank you, David. You have been always, so we appreciate it.
Terrific. Everyone have a good night and good luck on your vote.
So much. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, now we're going to move on to our motion, and I think Chris and Beth, do you want to present it? And then if there's some discussion that we need to have, we can do that and then move on to the vote.
Sure. So Beth and I are both making this motion, so it doesn't need another second because it's made by two voting members. The motion is for the board to approve the letter that was the proposed letter that was set forth in the agenda, which everyone hopefully by now has read. Just to summarize, so we try to explain who we are, what the Palisades is, what our residents' concerns are, which have been expressed to me and to Beth and by board members as well as residents in the last couple of days. We support the two letters that we've seen from the PFC, which is our respected Palisades Forestry Committee, and as well as the Dr. Longcore letter that people have mentioned, which is very long, very technical, but has a great summary of some of the issues, the scientific facts that were not followed, and some recommendations. We then go on to basically say we support these letters, we support their conclusions, and as I mentioned earlier, we asked for the advisory committee to reconsider their recommendations for Zone 0 in light of the scientific data regarding well-hydrated plants, and to make distinctions between the urban and rural areas, essentially. So that's what we've done in the letter. We have 2.5 days before the deadline to file. We haven't had a lot of time. We don't have a committee that's been formed to come up with something more, how shall I put it, more specific, which maybe I understand our speaker was perhaps suggesting, but that's just not something that we are prepared to do right at the moment. So that's all I want to say. And of course, we'll take questions or discussion at this point.
I know David answered a lot of questions and so did some of you. But are there questions about this letter? It might be also that we're sending subsequent letters. But
Correct.
This is our opening salvo that we want to get in before the deadline.
Maybe you want to call for a vote?
Yeah.
Maybe it could be easy at this point.
Okay, Donna, you have a question?
Donna needs to unmute.
Let's go to Daphne.
There we go. There we go. Sorry. Unfortunately, conclusion of the Historical Society's discussion on this morning. We can't support the letter the way it is written. We believe that there's many issues in here which are kind of misleading and frame it in kind of a black and white situation. So I think there is time, and my takeaway from David's presentation is that there is time if you all write a more coherent letter, and taking the opportunity to slow it down and ask for more input and discussion rather than coming up with sort of finite recommendations on how this should be or not applied. So as it stands, we do not support it.
Okay, we understand that. Thank you. Daphne?
I'm not voting on this, obviously, because Leanne is, but I did have one thought about the letter. I don't disagree with the letter, but I think given that it's going to people we are seeking help from with regard to our insurance issues, with regard to payment of different things, I think we need to acknowledge that in this particular environment, we appreciate their support, but that we feel strongly about what is being proposed here and think it could be handled a bit differently. Because it's almost, even though it's not criticizing them, I think, we've been reaching out to Senator Allen and all the other people to get support, and I think we should acknowledge that here. That's all.
Okay, so, we were trying to get a vote tonight only because there's a deadline to get this particular letter sent in.
Could I just add, if someone wants to say edit the letter, they'll have to make, a voting member will have to make a motion for an amendment. We'd have to hear what the exact amendment is proposed. We'd have to have a vote on that, discussion and a vote on that, then go back to the main motion. So I don't know if someone who's a voting member wants to make an amendment to the letter at this point.
I think the issue is that we don't have much time either to kind of get our foot in the door to say, we don't believe in one size fits all.
Yeah,
So-
I agree. Well, that obviously I agree, but
I mean, the letter pretty much says it all. I know that David, when he first came on and in discussions I've had with him, said, going forward, make sure that you do make suggestions about what we would like to see as opposed to just, what we're afraid of. And we can definitely do that going forward. But I think for our purposes tonight, we'd like to join with Brentwood and some of our other people that we work with and vote on the letter that's been written, which I think is a really good letter. So can we go to a vote?
Maybe take a hand vote first. People raise their hands. If they're in favor, people raise their hands if they're against or if
I'm
they.
gonna have to figure out a way to get all this down. I guess if everyone wants to raise their hand who's in favor of sending the letter, I'll try and get all of that. But you have to keep your hand up because.
Yeah, because we need a 2/3 vote, so. Well, who is Doreen? She has her hand up, but she's not a board member as far as
Not a board member, so Doreen, you can't. Can
One,
someone help me count the yeses?
3, 4, 5. Carrie Gallagher has her hand up. She's not a.
Carrie, you're not on the board.
Please put your hand
Only
down.
board members.
We may have to call names now. I'm sorry.
All right, let's
It's
call names.
confusing.
Quentin Fleming,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
yeah. Jenny's not here. Miriam,
Not here?
okay. Chris is a yes.
Yes.
Steve Crone,
Um,
here?
Sorry, I was muted, but my answer is yes.
Okay. Julia Nilsson,
Yes.
Karen Ridgely,
Yes.
or yeah, okay.
No.
I saw you both. Kimberly,
Yes.
Lori,
Lori,
Oh, yes. Sorry. I couldn't hear for a second. Lori Kudzle says yes.
okay, great.
Okay.
Alex, who's here for Sharon,
Yes.
Andrew Wolfberg,
Yes.
thank you. James Alexakis,
Yes.
Janet Anderson,
Yes.
Richard Blumenberg,
Well,
You're still muted.
Richard, could you please raise your hand or speak? Oh, he raised his hand. Yes.
Okay, yeah, okay, great, thanks. Eric, Dugdale?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Eric wasn't at the meeting this morning and we took a board vote not to support the letter, Eric.
Oh,
So
okay, oh no,
So
the
we'll
Historical
count that as
Society
a
does
no.
not
Okay.
support it.
All right, we'll count that as a no. Thank you.
okay.
No.
Kay Stansapir?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Jessica?
Yes.
See you. John Patton?
Yes.
Hegup?
Yes.
And I saw both Haldis and Dave, so who's gonna vote? Haldis?
Yeah, this.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we,
Oh. There's only one no vote. So
we want to vote, so I think it's
That's-
and I think we can look forward to sending one or two more letters as time goes on, but this one will come in before the deadline. And I'll make sure that,
let me just clarify so everyone knows. There's a bracketed phrase unanimously. Of course, that'll be taken out of the letter when it goes out.
okay, yeah, because it wasn't unanimous. Lori, do you have your hand up?
Sorry about that. I'll take it down. It was for the vote. Sorry about that. Hold on. Let me get it down.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I will send out, as soon as David Barrett sends us the information, the agenda and schedule for his 5:15 meeting, I'll send that out. I think it would be, sounds like it's going to be a really good meeting to attend.
Sue, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Cindy Young just sent a message to me that she votes yes. I don't think she was called on, so we're putting her down as a yes too.
Oh, did I miss her?
I guess, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, you also missed me, Aileen Howe. I'm with the Garden Club.
Well, the Garden Club is not on the board
You're
right
not
now.
on the
Oh,
board.
okay.
yes.
I thought it was. Okay.
Well, you are on the board. You're on the rotating list of members, but you're not for this year on the
The
board.
current board. Sorry. Next year. Okay. Well, I think then that we can conclude the meeting. I really appreciate all of you coming. I appreciate David coming. He's a wealth of information, as are some of you. We have experts on the board, which is great. And if anyone objects, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to close the meeting.
Thank you, Sue, for organizing this. Really
Thank
Thank
you,
you guys.
Sue.
Happy Cinco de
Thanks.
Mayo. I
Yeah.
hope you
Olay.
have a good evening. Yeah.
See you all on Thursday for another interesting.
Yeah.
Thank
Come
you.
on down.
Really
Thursday.
proud of you all.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Bye.
Thank
Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye-bye.
Good night from Germany. Bye.
Oh, all this.
All this.
Wow. Germany. Okay.
It's 2
They
o'clock in the
celebrate-
morning.
Are they celebrating Cinco de Mayo in Germany?
Hardly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.